My name is Ernestine Louise Harper. I'm 74 years old, and I still hand sew the little dresses I sell from my front porch here in the quiet outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. My long gray hair is always tied back in a braid, a habit I picked up years ago, maybe to keep up appearances, to show the world that I still had order, even when everything inside me felt broken. After a lifetime spent trying to protect my children from the world, I never imagined it would be my 8-year-old granddaughter who'd teach me to see a new kind of danger. Today I'm sharing this story not as a confession, but as a warning, especially to grandmothers like me, who think we've seen it all. I grew up in the Appalachian foothills, in a little wooden house painted baby blue, though the paint had long faded from rain and time. My mama would rise before the sun to bake bread, and my daddy, when his health allowed, would chop wood and tend to our modest patch of land. I was the oldest of 3 sisters. While Mama sewed for folks in town, I kept the younger ones in line. It was a hard life, but one stitched together with small acts of love, like fresh coffee in the mornings and blankets shared on cold nights. Tragedy doesn't always come with a scream. Sometimes it just slips in quiet. My mama died of a stroke one cold winter morning. My father was never the same. He stopped speaking, stopped getting out of bed. That's when my mother's oldest brother, Uncle Ray, came to help. A church-going man with soft-spoken manners and a suit every Sunday. A saint on the outside, but inside, a fog. I was only 11 when he moved in. 11. The age I learned the worst kind of scream is the one you never let out. Living with him felt like walking on glass barefoot. One glare could shut us down. Harsh words, accidental touches, punishments that only he thought made sense. I never told a soul. I couldn't. I used what little strength I had to protect my sisters. And when I finally could, I ran. I built a life far away, buried the past under layers of chores, family dinners, and fading memories. Decades passed. My oldest son married a woman who seemed sweet at first. I say seemed because I never truly felt at ease around her. Always busy, always on edge. When my son had to take a temporary job out of state, he asked me to stay with them, to help with the house, and his daughter, Luana. Luana was quiet, too quiet for a child, her eyes always searching like she was bracing for something invisible. One afternoon, while folding laundry, she came close, pressed her little face to mine and whispered, "Shh, Grandma, they're listening." And I listened, because her voice wasn't playing, it was warning, it was fear. The signs came slowly after that. Scribbles in notebooks, bruises explained away by falls, soft cries at night. It took time, but I began to understand. The same kind of monster that had haunted me as a child was circling my granddaughter now, with a new name, a new face, but the same poison. I had to choose between silence and salvation, and this time I wasn't going to get it wrong. So now, with trembling hands and a voice that still quivers, I share this not for sympathy, but because no child should carry fear alone. Evil hides in affection, in authority, in normalcy. It's only revealed when someone, trembling, terrified, dares to listen to what was never spoken out loud. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. If you can't, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep telling stories like this. Where are you listening from? Let me know in the comments below. I used to think my past was something I'd take to the grave, that if I buried it deep enough, it would stop hurting. But pain doesn't vanish with time. It just learns how to hide better. So today, I open that old chest, brush off the dust, and tell it all. Because if even one person sees themselves in my story, it'll all be worth it. My name is Ernestine. I was born in the hills of western North Carolina, but my story took shape in the silence between stitches, in stolen glances, in the shadows that lingered far too long. Now, from my kitchen filled with cinnamon and lavender, I speak as if you were sitting right across from me, not with bitterness, but with the calm of someone who lived through it. My hands may shake, but my voice doesn't. Not anymore. For years, I thought keeping my children safe was enough, that staying away from The past would protect us. But when I saw Luana's face, that expression, I knew that distance alone doesn't break the cycle. Truth does. And though it hurts, I'd rather bear the pain of speaking than the weight of silence. So I'll begin at the beginning, in that little blue house, filled with simple joys and fragile peace, where it all started. I remember the sun pouring through the cracks in the wall, the scent of homemade bread, and Mama's hands, always busy, always soft. My sisters and I ran, barefoot in the mud, making dolls from cloth scraps and castles from sticks. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Or so I thought, until death knocked quietly and everything changed. My childhood smelled like firewood and fresh bread. We lived in a little wooden house painted light blue, though the paint had faded from years of mountain rain and sun. It sat on a sloped patch of land in the Appalachian foothills, surrounded by dense trees and blackberry bushes. Every morning, the roosters, Crow would wake us, and our day would begin with the creaking of floorboards as Mama moved through the kitchen, stirring biscuit dough and humming hymns. I was the oldest of 3 sisters, and while Mama sewed for the women in town, I kept the younger 2 in line. It was a simple life, but it felt full. Like every piece of it, no matter how small, had meaning. My mother, Hazel, was a quiet woman with strong hands and soft eyes. She never raised her voice, but when she looked at you, you knew what she meant. She carried herself with the kind of grace that comes from hard work and heartache. My daddy, Earl, had a cough that came and went with the seasons. When he felt good, he'd chop firewood and work the land. Just a modest garden of green beans, onions, and sweet potatoes. When the cough got bad, he stayed inside, wrapped in quilts Mama made herself. He didn't talk much, but when he did, we listened. His laughter was rare, but when it came, it filled the room. We didn't have store-bought toys. We made our fun. A tree branch became a magic wand. A bucket turned into a tea set. On warm afternoons, we'd run barefoot through the creek, chasing dragonflies and daring each other to touch the coldest stones. When it rained, we sat on the porch and watched the drops race down the windows. Mama would read us from her old Bible or tell stories from when she was a girl. I still remember how her voice would change, soft and musical, like she was weaving the world with her words. Winters were the hardest. The cold pressed through the cracks in the walls and the wind howled like a wolf some nights. But inside, with the fireplace glowing and the smell of cinnamon in the air, we made it through. We shared a bed, all 3 of us girls, huddled close, whispering silly dreams until sleep took us. I always felt like nothing could harm us as long as we were together. The world outside was harsh, but our little home was a haven. Sundays were special. We'd dress in our best, usually hand-me-downs sewn by Mama, and walk to the tiny Baptist church down the road. Everyone there knew our names. After the service, there'd be peach cobbler and chatter on the church lawn. Sometimes Daddy would hum along with the hymns, and I'd watch Mama's eyes soften. Those days felt sacred, not because of the building or the preacher, but because we were whole, together. The seasons shaped everything. Spring brought wild flowers and the smell of fresh earth. Summer meant long days, sticky with heat and laughter. Autumn brought the rustle of falling leaves and the air turned crisp. And winter brought silence, deep and heavy. I learned to measure time by what the land gave and took. By the way, Mama's hands moved faster in spring, slower in winter. Life had a rhythm, and we moved with it. Daddy would sometimes take me to the edge of the woods and teach me the names of birds. "That's a Carolina wren," he'd say, pointing with his chin. I thought he knew everything. On his good days, he'd carve little animals from wood. Once he made me a horse with yarn for its mane. I still have it tucked away in a tin box. One of the few things I've kept through the years. A piece of before. Mama's sewing machine had a squeaky pedal, but she often chose to sew by hand. "Each stitch means something," she'd say. She taught me too. I learned to thread a needle before I could read properly. Sitting beside her, mimicking her movements, was the closest thing I had to a secret. Language. Just us, quiet, focused, connected. That skill, so ordinary, would later become my way of healing. We didn't have a clock, but we always knew when it was time to eat or rest. The light changed, the chickens called, the air shifted. We ate what we grew, thanked God for it, and never wasted a crumb. Mama would close her eyes and whisper a prayer before every meal. I used to watch her lips and try to guess the words. I think I still do that sometimes when I'm alone in my kitchen. Sometimes our neighbor Miss Ellie would come by. She was a midwife and full of stories. Her laugh echoed and her presence filled the room. Mama would pour her coffee, and they'd talk in hushed tones while I listened from behind the curtain. Their words felt like spells, half gossip, half wisdom. It was in those moments I realized women carried the weight of the world with quiet strength. One fall, Eugenia got sick with a high fever. Daddy walked miles through the cold to get the doctor. We stayed up all night, putting cool cloths on her forehead. I prayed harder than I ever had. She got better. Mama cried while holding her, rocking her like a baby. That was the first time I understood fear, the kind that grips your chest and won't let go, the kind that makes you realize just how fragile happiness can be. Every day was the same, and yet every day felt like a gift. I'd pick wildflowers and place them by Mama's bed. She'd smile and say, "You're my sunshine, Ernestine." I believed her. I thought love was unbreakable, that bad things only lived in stories. But life has its own stories to tell, and not all of them are kind. Our schoolhouse had one room and one teacher, Miss Ruth. She smelled like peppermint and always wore her hair in a tight bun. I liked learning, reading, writing, drawing little pictures on the corners of my notebook. Sometimes she'd let me read aloud to the younger students. I felt proud, important, like I mattered. After school, we'd walk home barefoot, laughing, dreaming. My favorite spot was a big oak tree behind the house. I'd sit beneath it at dusk, watching the fireflies appear one by one. I'd imagine being a grown-up with my own home, my own family. I wanted to be a teacher, or maybe a seamstress. I didn't care much, as long as I could feel safe and warm and free. I didn't know that dreams can shatter as quickly as a dropped plate on a kitchen floor. Eugenia was the playful one, always giggling. Martha, the serious one, clung to me like a second shadow. I was her protector, her guide. When she had bad dreams, she'd slip into my bed, tuck her tiny fingers into mine, and fall asleep to my whispers. That bond between us, sisterhood, it's what kept me going later. When things got dark, when I had to choose between silence and defiance. Mama always said life was like sewing. Sometimes the thread tangles, but you don't give up. You start again. I believed her with my whole heart. I thought as long as we were together, nothing could break. Us. I didn't know evil doesn't knock. It just walks right in when no one's looking. And once it's inside, it doesn't leave easily. The morning Mama died began like any other. A sharp chill lingered in the air, but the sky was clear. I was 11, folding laundry on the porch when I heard a thud from inside. I ran to the kitchen and found her collapsed on the floor. Her eyes open but vacant, her lips parted like she was about to speak. Her coffee cup had shattered, and the smell of burnt toast hung in the air. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just stood there frozen, until Martha came in behind me and started sobbing. That sound, her crying, it snapped something inside me. Daddy came as soon as he heard the noise. When he saw Mama, he dropped to his knees and let out a sound I've never forgotten, a kind of howl that came from the deepest place a man can carry pain. After that day, he stopped getting out of bed. He barely spoke. He stopped eating, stopped being. The man we knew faded into a shadow. It was like we'd lost both parents in one breath, and just like that, the house lost its warmth. The silence stretched long and heavy across every room. The funeral was small. Folks from church came with casseroles and quiet condolences. I don't remember their faces or the words they spoke. I only remember the flowers, lilies mostly, and the sound of dirt hitting wood. When we returned home, the world felt different, colder, dimmer. I tried to keep things going, tried to be the new mama for my sisters. But I was a child too, pretending to be strong with trembling hands. That's when Uncle Ray arrived, my mama's older brother. We hadn't seen him in years. He showed up in a dusty car with one small suitcase and that same old leather Bible he always carried. His voice was soft, his manners polished. He said Mama had asked him to look after us if anything ever happened. Daddy didn't argue. He barely reacted at all, just nodded, and Uncle Ray moved right in. I wanted to believe he was a blessing, a gift sent by Mama herself. But even then, something about his presence didn't sit right. The first few days, he played the part well. He cooked us dinner, helped with chores, even prayed with us at night. He said God was watching us closely, that we had to stay on the right path to honor Mama. His voice was smooth, his tone gentle, but there was something behind his eyes, something I couldn't name and didn't want to. Slowly, things began to change. We had to ask permission before stepping outside. We could no longer speak at the dinner table. Laughter became rare. Martha and Eugenia tiptoed around the house. Daddy stayed locked in his room, sinking deeper into whatever fog had swallowed him whole. Uncle Ray started making the rules that felt more like traps, and I tried with every ounce of my being to keep the world from falling apart completely. Then came the night I woke up and saw a shadow in the doorway. Uncle Ray, standing there saying, was checking on us. He said it was his job to keep us safe. I pretended to be asleep, my body stiff, my breathing shallow. He stayed there for a long time before walking away. I didn't sleep at all that night. Something had shifted. Something inside me knew we were no longer safe. He started using the Bible to teach us about obedience and submission. He said Mama had trusted him to guide us, that his authority was God's will. He'd quote verses I didn't understand, twisting them into lessons about loyalty and silence. I listened because I had to, but deep inside, something started building, a knot of dread, a whisper of defiance. Soon, we weren't allowed to go to school. Uncle Ray said he'd teach us at home. That way we'd stay pure, protected. He controlled our days, our movements, our thoughts. I started memorizing his routines, when he left the house, when he prayed, when he watched. I kept my sisters close, tried to make life feel normal, but every day it got harder. This fear grew like ivy through the floorboards, quiet, steady, choking everything in its path. He never yelled. That was the scariest part. He didn't need to. A look, a pause, the way he'd lower his voice, that was enough to silence us, enough to keep us in check. I stopped hoping Daddy would save us. I stopped hoping anyone would. And deep down, I started thinking of ways to save myself, and more importantly, them. At first, Uncle Ray felt like a ghost, always present, always watching, but never quite part of us. He moved around the house with a quietness that made the hair on my arm stand up. He'd hum old hymns under his breath and speak to us in that calm, preacher-like voice that everyone in town seemed to respect. To the outside world, he was the image of a man doing his Christian duty. But inside our home, his presence grew heavier, like smoke that never left the room. The change was slow, almost clever. He started assigning me more responsibilities, cleaning the entire house, cooking every meal, watching my sisters constantly. He said I was becoming a young lady and needed to learn how to manage a home. At first I tried to see it as a compliment, but the way he looked at me when he said it made me feel exposed. I began dressing in layers, wearing oversized shirts, tying my hair back tight. I hoped if I disappeared a little, he'd stop seeing me the way he did. Soon, the lessons began. He'd ask me to stay after dinner for scripture reading. Said I was the most mature of the girls and needed extra guidance. We'd sit in silence as he read, and he'd place his hand on mine while he spoke, just gently, just long enough for my skin to crawl. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the Bible, trying to memorize every word, as if they could shield me somehow. He changed the house rules again. No leaving the yard without asking. No visitors. No talking during chores. He said the world outside was dangerous, full of temptation. that we were better, off within the boundaries he set. My sisters began to wilt like flowers in the shade. Eugenia stopped humming. Martha had trouble sleeping. I started hiding notes to myself, scraps of paper where I'd write things like, "You are not crazy, and one day this will end." I kept them under a loose floorboard in my room. He made us pray 3 times a day. If we missed a word or bowed too slowly, we had to start over. He said discipline built character. One day, Martha tripped on the stairs and he called it a lesson from God. I wanted to scream, but I bit my tongue until it bled. That night, I whispered apologies into her hair as we lay in bed, promising her it wouldn't always be this way, promising myself, too. The nights were the worst. Every creak in the hallway sent my heart racing. I began staying up late, listening, memorizing the sound of his steps. I kept a pair of scissors under my pillow. I never meant to use them, but just knowing they were there made me feel like I had something, anything, in my control. One afternoon, I caught him watching me through the crack of the kitchen door. He didn't blink, didn't move, just stood there, eyes fixed like I was something to be studied. I turned around and walked out the back door, straight into the woods, where I cried in silence. When I came back, he pretended nothing happened. But from that moment on, I never let my guard down again. He started calling me his responsibility. Said Mama had given me to him, that she'd wanted him to make sure I stayed on the right path. He said I had to be purified, though he never explained what that meant. His words were always wrapped in religion, in duty, in twisted love. And I nodded, smiled, obeyed. But inside I began building a wall, brick by brick, thought by thought. I kept my sisters close. I created little games with them, codes we could use if something felt wrong. If I tied my hair in a certain way, they knew not to come in the room. If I whistled twice, they knew to stay near each other. They thought it was fun. But for me, it was survival. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His quietness was his weapon. His calm made everything worse, more confusing. If he'd been cruel openly, maybe I could have screamed. Maybe someone would have believed me. But no one questions a man who quotes scripture and mows the church lawn every Sunday. One day he gave me a ribbon, blue, like Mama's favorite color. "To keep your hair pretty," he said. I took it, with shaking hands, said thank you, and threw it into the fireplace when no one was looking. That small act felt like rebellion, like I still had a piece of myself he couldn't touch. He began isolating me further, told Daddy I was acting up. Daddy didn't ask questions. He just nodded from behind his bedroom door. I stopped hoping for help. I began hoping only for time. Time to think, time to plan. In the rare moments he left the house, I would search his room. Once I found a notebook filled with his own sermons, scribbled lines about discipline and sacrifice. There were no names, no confessions, but the tone sent chills through me. I closed it and never touched it again. But I remembered every word I read. One night Eugenia asked if Uncle Ray was our new daddy. I choked on my breath. "No," I said, "he's just helping." But I knew that answer wouldn't work forever. The girls were getting older. They were beginning to notice too much. The worst part wasn't the fear. It was the pretending. Smiling during supper, saying prayers, playing the obedient child. Every moment was a performance, and the longer it lasted, the more I feared I'd forget who I really was underneath it all. So I wrote again, another note. This one I didn't hide. I slipped it into the crack of the old oak tree out back, just in case someone found it, just in case I didn't get another chance. It said, "We're not okay, please look closer," because I knew something was coming. I could feel it in my bones, like a storm brewing beneath calm skies. And I knew that when it came, I would either fall or fight. I became the glue that held our crumbling house together, while the days stretched endlessly and the silence thickened like syrup. I did everything I could to keep things running. I woke up before dawn to start the fire, cleaned the house until my fingers bled, kept Martha and Eugenia fed, bathed, and quiet. Every task was a shield, a distraction. If the house looked perfect, if the girls behaved if I didn't make a sound, maybe he'd leave us alone. That was the rhythm I moved to. Survive, protect, repeat. Daddy was still a ghost. He ate what I placed in front of him, then returned to his room like a prisoner serving time. Sometimes I wondered if he knew, if the silence in his eyes was guilt or just emptiness. I stopped waiting for him to act. I became both mother and sentry. Every glance from Uncle Ray was a code to decipher. Every movement in the hallway was a question I had to answer without speaking. I stopped crying. It felt like a weakness I couldn't afford. If I broke, he'd know. And if he knew, he'd take it as permission to tighten the rope. Instead, I became a statue, obedient, quiet, watching. My body did what it had to, but inside, I was retreating into a locked room of my own making, the one place he couldn't follow, the place where I still remembered who I was before he came. The signs of stress crept into my body. My hair thinned, my skin itched, my hands trembled when I tried to sew. I bit my nails until they bled. I stopped looking in mirrors. I didn't recognize the girl in them anymore. Her eyes hollow, her shoulders always tense. I wore oversized clothes, layered until I disappeared under them. I thought, maybe if I look like nothing, he'll lose interest. I started hiding things, scraps of paper with messages to myself. Stay strong, they need you, Mama is watching. I tucked them under floorboards, inside old jars, behind books. I didn't know if it helped, but it made me feel like I still existed, like I hadn't completely disappeared. I invented a system of signals for the girls. If I tied a red ribbon in my braid, it meant stay upstairs. If I knocked twice on the kitchen wall, it meant stay together. They didn't question it. They just obeyed. I told them it was a game, but they weren't dumb. They were scared, too. At night, I hardly slept. I listened for footsteps, for creaking wood, for the soft sound of his breathing outside our door. I kept a metal spoon under my mattress, wrapped in cloth, not to hurt him, just something solid to hold, something that reminded me I could act if I had to. He watched everything, my tone, my posture, the way I spoke to the girls. He liked control. He liked knowing I was afraid. That's what gave him power. And so I smiled. I nodded. I played the part. But inside, I was planning. I studied his routines, what he ate, when he left the house, when he slept. I wrote it, all down in my head. No paper, no evidence, just memory, just me. One morning, Martha had a fever. I asked Uncle Ray to call a doctor. He said no, said we'd pray. I didn't argue. But when he left to buy groceries, I wrapped her in blankets and carried her down the hill to Miss Ellie's house. She called the nurse. She didn't ask questions. She just helped. That was the first crack. When he returned and found us gone, he was furious. But I lied. Said Martha had started convulsing. Said I thought she might die. His anger turned to silence. That scared me more. The house changed after that. He watched me closer, but he didn't stop me. I think something in him knew that if he pushed harder, I might break in a way he couldn't control. And that terrified him, because he didn't want chaos. He wanted obedience, clean, quiet, holy obedience. I kept sewing, even when my fingers were raw. Every stitch was a prayer, a plea, a promise. One day, I sewed a tiny red heart onto the inside hem of Martha's dress, just for her. She didn't notice, but I knew it was there. A secret act of love, a thread of rebellion. The isolation was crushing. We never left the house, no school, no church, no neighbors. But one day, while hanging laundry, I saw Miss Ellie pass by. I waved. She waved back. Our eyes met, and for a moment I let mine soften. Just enough for her to see past the smile. Just enough for her to wonder. I started paying attention to the cracks in the walls, the weak spots in the floor, the places where sound echoed less. If I needed to hide something or someone, I needed to be ready. I wasn't sure for what, but I knew the day would come. I felt it in my bones. Eugenia drew a picture one day of a house with bars on the windows. A girl stood outside it holding hands with two smaller girls. She said it was a dream. I nodded, kissed her forehead, and didn't say a word. That drawing now lives in the back of my sewing box, folded like a prayer. He started calling me his girl, like it was a title, a reward. I nodded. I smiled. But my jaw hurt from the effort. My stomach ached all the time. I stopped eating much. My body shrunk. My spirit didn't. When I couldn't bear it anymore, I started talking to Mama. Just whispers. In the pantry. In the yard. Tell me what to do. Tell me when. Tell me how. I never heard an answer, but I kept asking. I had to believe someone was still listening. Then, one night, Eugenia woke up screaming. Said she saw him standing in the hallway. I checked. He was gone. But I knew she hadn't lied. I held her until she fell back asleep. Then I sat at the edge of the bed until morning, knife in hand, heart pounding. I stopped hoping for rescue. I started planning for escape. I studied maps, timed the path to Miss Ellie's, taught the girls to pack fast, to move quiet. I turned fear into preparation, because that was all I had. When he started locking the front door at night, I found the key, hid it in my boot. When he took the phone cord out of the wall, I found a payphone route, wrote it in chalk under the porch. I didn't wait for someone to save us. I became the one who would. I didn't know how or when, but I knew a moment would come, a crack in the armor, a window in the routine, and when it came, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd run, I'd scream, I'd fight, not just for me, for them, for Mama, for all the girls who learned to survive in silence. The first sign of resistance came quietly. I was sweeping the kitchen when Martha tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "We should run away." I froze, not because of the words, but because of the certainty in her voice. She wasn't playing. She wasn't scared. She was planning. My heart clenched with pride and sadness at once. I crouched down and whispered back, "Not yet." And that was the beginning, not of the escape, but of the belief that it was possible. I started paying closer attention to Uncle Ray, not with fear, but with intention. Every time he left the house, I counted how long he was gone. Every time he touched the Bible, I watched where he placed it. He liked control, patterns, predictability. So I started making notes in my head. When he got sleepy, what made him mad, what made him let his guard down, knowledge became my armor. Late one night, when the girls were asleep, I crept into the kitchen and carved a small arrow under the table with a sewing pin. It pointed towards the back door. I told myself it was just to test my nerve, but really, it was a breadcrumb, a signal to future me that I was ready, that I could do this. It was the smallest act of defiance, and it changed everything. Miss Ellie came by one morning with a jar of jam. She stood on the porch a little longer than usual, watching me closely. "You all right, Ernestine?" she asked. I gave her my practiced smile and nodded. But my eyes didn't lie. I let them tremble, let her see the tired behind them. She didn't say anything else, just nodded once and walked away. That night, I left a note in the mailbox. "Not safe. Please come back." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. Uncle Ray didn't suspect anything. I kept doing my chores, kept smiling at supper, but I began to push in tiny ways. I forgot to fold his shirts just right. Took a few seconds too long to answer when he called. Once I corrected a Bible verse during our nightly prayer. He stared at me, but didn't say a word. I stared right back. My heart pounded for an hour afterward. But I didn't break. Eugenia handed me a drawing one afternoon. It was of a girl standing on top of a hill, arms wide, wind blowing her dress. "It's you," she said. I laughed, but my eyes stung. "Why am I on a hill?" I asked. She smiled. "Because you're watching everything." That drawing went into my sewing box. A quiet reminder. They were watching me too, learning from me, finding courage in my steps. One night Martha couldn't sleep. She sat up in bed and asked, "Does Mama know what's happening?" I nodded, trying. not to cry. She does, and she's proud of you." It was the first time I'd said it out loud. The first time I let the truth rise to the surface like steam. I think it healed something in both of us, because Martha reached over, took my hand, and whispered, "Then I'll be brave, too." I began testing the doors at night, finding which hinges squeaked, which ones opened quietly. I left coins under a loose porch board, just enough for a phone call. I couldn't carry a suitcase, so I hid a small cloth bag behind the pantry with 2 dresses, socks, and a jar of peanut butter. It was nothing, but it was a start, a piece of after waiting for us. Uncle Ray started asking me to recite Bible verses during prayer time. I chose ones about justice, about light finding the darkness. I watched his face. Sometimes he flinched. Sometimes he smiled too wide. I knew he was catching on, but I didn't stop. Each word was a stone I threw at the walls he'd built around us. Miss Ellie came back a week later, this time with cornbread. She stayed longer, asked about the girls. I kept my voice calm, but my fingers trembled as I held the plate. When she left, I followed her outside and whispered, "Thank you." That was all. But she nodded, eyes glassy. She knew, and I knew she knew. I started writing again, not notes for me, but for the girls. Little affirmations. "You are strong. You are smart. You are loved." I hid them in their pillowcases, under their socks, behind their storybooks. I never told them they were from me, but I watched their eyes light up when they found them. It made them walk a little taller, and that made everything worth it. We began to laugh again, just in whispers, in secret. When Uncle Ray was outside, I told the girls silly stories, made funny faces behind his back, gave their dolls secret names. These moments were our resistance. Laughter in a house built on fear. Joy where there shouldn't be any. It was the kind of rebellion he couldn't trace, couldn't punish, and I felt something rise inside me. Not rage, not yet, but something deeper. A fire, a sense that I was still here, still fighting. That every stitch I made, every rule I bent, every whisper I shared with the girls was a step toward freedom. I didn't know how much longer we had, but I knew one thing for sure. When the moment came, I would be ready. The day it all broke open started like any other. Gray skies, the scent of damp earth after a storm, the weight of silence pressing on every room. Was folding laundry in the hallway when I heard the back door close too softly. Uncle Ray didn't speak, just moved past me with that same calm that always made my skin crawl. But something was off. He hadn't gone to church that morning like usual. He was supposed to be gone for hours. My hands froze mid-fold. My heartbeat, loud and uneven, filled my ears. Later that afternoon, he asked me to help him clean the storage room off the back porch, a space he never touched. The girls were upstairs. The house was quiet. Every nerve in my body screamed not to go. But I nodded, followed him, stepping slowly, calculating. I had tucked a sewing pin in the hem of my sleeve that morning, a habit by now. My fists clenched, my breath shallow. The room was dim, dust-heavy. The door clicked shut behind me. He said something about needing to talk. My feet shifted backward without me meaning to. He reached toward the shelves, pretending to look for something. Then he turned, too close, too calm, and I saw it in his eyes. He was done pretending. My mouth opened before I even thought about it. "Don't." One word, sharp, solid. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said it again. "Don't." He froze. Maybe it was my tone. Maybe it was the fact that I didn't flinch, that I looked him in the eye. I felt my fingers close around the pin in my sleeve. I didn't raise it, just held it. Something in his face shifted. A twitch, a doubt. He backed away slowly. The moment passed, but it changed everything. I opened the door and walked out. Fast, straight to the girls' room. I packed a small bag. Martha asked what I was doing. "We're leaving," I said. "Now. No crying, no panic, just clarity." I told them to put on their shoes, that we were going to Miss Ellie's, that we couldn't wait anymore. We slipped out the side door, cutting through the tall grass behind the chicken coop. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward us. We didn't run. We walked fast. Heads down. I held their hands so tight my knuckles turned white. Every rustle in the woods made my heart race. But I didn't look back. Not once. Miss Ellie was on her porch when we arrived. She took one look at us and opened the door. No questions. No hesitation. She wrapped us in blankets, made us tea, and sat quietly while I told her everything, what I'd never dared to say before. My voice didn't shake. It was low and even, like I'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. Maybe I had. Maybe I'd been saying it in my head for years. That night we slept in beds that weren't ours but felt safer than any place we'd known. The house was still, the air clean. I laid awake for hours listening to the girls breathe. They were safe. I had done it. I had pulled us out. And though I didn't know what would come next, if the law would do anything, if people would believe me, I knew this. He wouldn't touch them. Not again. Not ever. The next morning, Miss Ellie made phone calls. To the pastor, to the sheriff, to people who mattered, and word spread. Some didn't believe it. Others cried. Some said, I always had a feeling, but no one said I was lying. And that was enough. For now. Uncle Ray left town 2 days later. Quiet, just like he came. No goodbye, no explanation. Daddy never left his room. He never asked where we'd gone. He never asked what happened. I think deep down he knew. I stopped waiting for his redemption. If this moment stirred something in you, like this video so others can find the strength to act when silence no longer protects them. That day was the end of our nightmare, but also the beginning of something harder. Healing. Rebuilding. But we were free. And freedom, even with scars, is the most powerful thing I've ever held. It's been over 60 years since the day I walked my sisters out of that house. Now, from my porch in a quiet corner of Asheville, with the soft hum of summer bugs and the smell of peach cobbler drifting from my kitchen, I can still feel that moment, like it was yesterday. Martha lives in Atlanta now, has 3 grown kids, and the loudest laugh you've ever heard. Eugenia teaches art in a little school near Nashville. And me? I still sew dresses by hand. My fingers aren't as fast, but my heart's steadier than it's ever been. Uncle Ray was never held accountable in a courtroom, but he lost his grip on us the moment I opened that door and didn't look back. And that was justice enough for me. Sometimes justice is found not in punishment, but in survival. In taking the pain he tried to brand us with and turning it into protection, into power, into peace. We were girls when it started, but we didn't stay that way. We grew, we healed, we became. When my son asked me to help with Luana, I thought I was too old, too tired, too far removed from all that pain. But that little girl with her quiet eyes and steady silence brought it all rushing back. She didn't need me to feed her or fold her laundry. She needed me to listen, really listen. And I did, because I remembered what it felt like to be unheard. Because this time, I would not stay silent. Luana is 12 now. Her laugh fills the room like sunlight. She paints her feelings and asks deep questions and sleeps with her bedroom door wide open, safe, free. Sometimes she curls up next to me and whispers, "Thanks for keeping me safe, Grandma." But what she doesn't know is she saved me too. She reminded me that healing doesn't stop at survival. It keeps going. It passes down. It protects the next generation. I haven't seen her mother in years, and I don't need to. My son eventually saw the signs. He came home, he listened, he apologized. We don't talk about the details much, but we make space for honesty and forgiveness and growth. Every Sunday, he brings Luana over for dinner. She sets the table. I serve dessert. We sit, we eat together, not broken, just real. Sometimes when I hem a dress and the needle slips just right, I hear Mama's voice again, humming, laughing, teaching me how to stitch pain into beauty. I like to think she sees us now, that she knows I did what she couldn't, that I kept her girls safe, and that her love, quiet, strong, enduring, lives on in every thread I pull. This isn't a fairy tale. There's no ribbon to wrap around the ending, but there's peace, there's clarity, there's truth. I was a girl who lost her voice, a woman who found it again, and a grandmother who used it to protect what mattered most. If this story spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and share it. It helps me keep telling the stories I once kept buried, and I'd love to hear from you. What did this bring up for you? Who did you think of while listening? Let's talk in the comments. I'm here, just like someone once was, for me.